All right, Braves fans, let's get rolling. I'm George McNair, and this is State of the Braves. Well, guys, on this edition, I kind of look forward to doing this every year. It is previewing the MLB draft, and obviously specific to the Braves and what they're going to do. Now, of course, I am no expert on the draft, particularly, and the MLB draft is many more rounds than the NBA draft or the even the NFL draft. It's a lot fewer rounds than it used to be, but it's still 20 rounds. So I'm not going to dive into all of that. And there's so many variables to the MLB draft that make it much more difficult to project, especially even if you get down beyond the first few picks. It's just really hard because it's not strictly just about player talent or team need. It has a lot to do with what the team's willing to spend, a certain slot in a certain round, and the Braves typically keep things really close to the vest and will do things their own way. So very difficult to project what the Braves are going to do. I'm going to throw out several names for you today. So if you haven't been following the draft at all, you'll at least be familiar with some of these names. Maybe you can look for them when the draft comes down. The MLB draft is now televised. I think it will probably be on MLB TV. Sorry, I should have looked at that. I know MLB TV does cover the later rounds of the draft at least, but I'm not sure about round one. But just the fact that it's televised now, you can follow it. It's much more friendly to the fans than it used to be. So the first thing I want to do today is go into the strengths and weaknesses of the Brave system, and then what I really want to do is look back in at least the history of Alex Anthopoulos since he's been a GM. What have the Braves done in the draft, at least through the first two or three rounds, so that we can try to see any trends and where they might be focusing their attention, and from there maybe we can get a feel for what they might do this year. Then again, we might just be guessing. So, and they'll probably surprise us. Now, Herson Waldrop was a name that was floated to the Braves last year, so that was one that actually wasn't super surprising. Some people didn't think he would drop as low as he did to the Braves, but his name was floated um, last year. So, one of the names we'll mention today could be a guy that the Braves end up drafting, and we'll obviously just have to see. But let's go ahead and get into the strengths and weaknesses of the Braves system. Unfortunately, there aren't a ton of true strengths to the system, at least in the higher levels of the minors. Now, keep in mind, according to MLB.com and Baseball America, and some of those other publications are going to be similar, but MLB.com has the Braves with the fifth worst farm system in baseball. Now, that was at least to start the season. This was done in March. Now, the Braves have replenished some of the lower levels of the farm system with the international signing period that has been done since March. So, the lowest levels, okay, they might be a little stronger than they were when they did that last farm system ranking. I always think the Braves get a little lower in the farm system rankings anyways. Some of that has to do with the Braves don't really publicize or pump up their prospects to get top 100 rankings, or a lot of times the Braves are a little more aggressive, like with Michael Harris. They'll actually graduate that player to the big leagues before they ever are technically a top 100 prospect. That happened with Spencer Strider as well. So all that being said, that ranking is helpful in one sense, but I mean it's not a science. It's not down to a science. So, anyways, the strengths. This is just from me. I think the strength of the Braves farm system is right-handed pitching. This should not be too much of a shock to you guys if you follow the Braves and what they do with their drafts and with their minor leagues right now. They draft a ton of right-handed power pitchers. They've been doing that pretty much ever since Anthopoulos, and really before actually Anthopoulos even got onto the scene. So they have a lot of guys. I think they draft with the idea that some of them are going to flame out, some of them are never going to turn into anything. And if you just hit on a couple of them and you get a couple of them right, then you're golden. So that is a strength. They have a lot of them throughout the system. Some of them are injured right now. Some of them like Spencer Schwellenbach, right? He is at the big league level. We've got Smith Shawver and Waldrop. Minor injuries, hopefully, but they're close. And a couple others that are further away, like Owen Murphy, J.R. Ritchie, who is um, coming back from Tommy John, but also a pretty highly touted guy as well. So yeah, they have a lot of names in the system right now. They have some solid lefties too, but definitely on the right-handed side of things is where I think their biggest strength is in their system. And that's a good place to have a strength for sure. Now, the weakness of their system, honestly, is kind of all position players. I mean, they're just, they have some at the lowest levels, especially again with this international signing period that they've just gone through. And they have a couple that are playing really good. I'll talk about these guys in a minute, but that are playing really good at the AAA level as well. But I would say outfield is probably the weakest area. I think the Braves have 4 of their top 30 prospects are outfielders, which isn't much. And there's really no clear impact guys in the outfield that are close to the big leagues. And that's showing up right now, with the injuries that the Braves have had in the outfield. They're plugging in guys like Forrest Wall and Eli White instead of having, if they had a top 10 prospect, they could go to that guy, and they just don't have that. Catcher is also, they have a good catcher in Drake Baldwin close to the bigs, but they don't, and they have a couple other decent ones, but they don't have a large depth of catcher as well. So, I don't know that they're going to target a catcher. There aren't a ton of great fits, I think, in this draft, but so I don't know if they're going to target a catcher this year, but that is, I think, a need in their system as well. All right, so yeah, let me just talk about a few top performing prospects right now. It's been a while since I've done any kind of minor league, looking down into the minor leagues and who's playing well. Sometimes I'll mention things in passing, but I wanted to mention these guys as we're talking about the draft. I think it kind of lends itself to talk about the Braves minor league system a little bit too. I've been a big fan of these first 2 guys really since the Braves drafted them not too long ago. The first is Drake Baldwin. I already mentioned him. He is a catcher, lefty catcher. He's made his way all the way up to AAA and has been on a tear, especially a power tear. And some really think that he actually could be a primary trade piece for the Braves at the trade deadline. Of course, I think the simple thing is, well, he's a catcher close to the big leagues. The Braves have 2 really good catchers right now, so there's just no place for him. And I think that's obviously legitimate. But man, I've really liked his hit tool ever since the Braves drafted him. I think some people have kind of questioned his ability to make contact consistently, but that's really been improved ever since he got into the Braves system, and he just hits the ball hard constantly. So really good offensive catcher, and his defense has improved a lot too. I think that's probably the last thing the Braves want him to, improve maybe just a little bit more to make sure that he's big league ready. But we remember William Contreras not too long ago was kind of in this same situation. Braves brought him up when the need arose. And, he's obviously an all-star catcher now, unfortunately, with the Brewers. That's a whole nother story, right? But yeah, I think Drake Baldwin is a guy to really keep an eye out for. We'll see if the Braves end up trading him away. A good hitting catcher who is pretty solid defensively as well. Looks like he has the ability to be solid defensively is going to be something that other teams ask for at the trade deadline, and the Braves certainly have other needs right now. But you never know. You could have an injury to d'Arnaud or to Murphy, and then there's a need for the Braves at the big league level. Nacho Alvarez is the other guy that I've been a huge fan of ever since the Braves drafted him. They drafted him in the 5th round a couple years ago, and he was kind of a no-name. I mean, a lot of people had no idea who this guy was out of a junior college in, I think, California. And his defense was kind of his calling card at the start. The question was, could he play shortstop? He had been a very solid third baseman. And I think there's still some question mark. He's at AAA as well. And does he have the defensive range to be able to play shortstop at the big league level? His glove is very good. But offensively, this is what's getting people really excited about Nacho Alvarez. I'm excited just about the name, Nacho Alvarez. I love it. But Nacho is offensively has always been great at putting the bat on the ball, good contact skills, and great on base skills. A great eye at the plate. Just does not chase outside the strike zone very much. But the big thing to be excited about now is he's starting to tap into his power and turn just contact and base hits into doubles and home runs. And he's hit, actually, he hadn't been up at AAA very long. I think he's already hit 4 home runs. So Alvarez, obviously, shortstop is a little bit more of a need for the Braves. Orlando Arcia continues to struggle offensively, and it just has me thinking, if, is Nacho Alvarez ready? Could the Braves at some point pull the trigger? I think it would be, a pretty bold move for them to bench Arcia and put Nacho Alvarez in the starting lineup in the middle of, a pennant race and all that stuff. But it obviously would be a great way to see if he had what it takes. And I think offensively it would be a big upgrade from what Arcia has been, which isn't saying much, but I do think that's the case. So Nacho, I think even more so than Drake Baldwin this year, might be a guy to keep an eye on. The last guy I'll mention right now for the Braves in their farm system is Blake Burkhalter, right-handed pitcher, another one of those righties. He was a 2022 draft pick, and he almost immediately had to go under the knife for Tommy John surgery, so he's been trying to get back ever since. So far, he has 7 starts on the season. He has a 2.70 ERA between low A Augusta and high A Rome. And so he's just a guy to keep an eye on, a guy that probably has been lost, to beyond the back of our minds, just we haven't thought of in a while as he's been injured. But, his last start, he threw 5 innings, 2 earned runs, 6 strikeouts. So he's just pitching very solidly at high A Rome right now. So some guys to think about. I think Burkhalter is obviously a little further away, but if he has a good season, he might start getting into the Braves' plans in 2025. All right, so guys, now let's look at the Braves in their draft. Let's think about their typical draft strategy under Alex Anthopoulos. And again, I'm really just focusing on the first 3 rounds. I might mention a few other things that happen in each of those drafts beyond the first 3 rounds, just so we're clear on that and kind of jog our memories on what has happened over these years of Alex Anthopoulos being the GM. Now, obviously, Anthopoulos it's not a one-man show. He's actually got a ton of scouts and several guys who are, at the helm of the scouting department who are probably leading the charge, but obviously Anthopoulos is also going to have a big say in who they end up drafting as well. So keep in mind that the Braves have the number 24 pick in the first round of this year's draft, and then they don't pick again until the 62nd overall pick. That's in the second round. They don't have any compensation picks in between the first and second round, like sometimes they do. Sometimes you can have 2 first-round picks. Sometimes you can have 2 second-round picks. So, it's just kind of different in the MLB draft. But this year it's pretty straightforward. They just have 1 pick in the first, 1 in the second, 1 in the third. All right, so let's look backwards just a little bit. In 2018, and I'm not gonna say every name of every guy the Braves picked in these years. I'll mention a few specific that jump out. But in 2018, first round the Braves picked a pitcher, second round an outfielder, and the third round they didn't have a third round pick that year. That ended up being a very bad draft. Again, this was the first this was the first draft for Anthopoulos. A lot of good things happened in 2018, but not the draft. Very bad draft. You might remember this is where they picked Carter Stewart with their first pick. He ended up having some injury issues. He didn't sign with the Braves. I think he went on to pitch in Korea for a while. I'm not sure actually if he's made it to the big leagues yet. And beyond that, they really didn't draft any impact players in 2018. So kind of a bummer on that year. 2019, the Braves drafted. They have 2 first-round picks in this draft. They drafted a catcher, that was Shea Langoliers, and then they drafted a shortstop as well, which was Braden Shoemake. Second round, they drafted a pitcher. Third round, this was the big one. They drafted an outfielder named Michael Harris II. You may have heard of him. So because of Harris, honestly, this ended up being a really good draft. But also, the Braves drafted multiple prospects that they ended up trading for major league talent. So, you have Langoliers, Um, in this draft. You have Shoemake, all these guys end up being traded. And also Vaughn Grissom was in this draft. So you end up getting Olson and Sean Murphy and Chris Sale for the guys that you drafted, or at least partially the guys you drafted in this draft. So 2019 was actually a very successful draft for the Braves, I would say. Now 2020 was a abbreviated draft because of COVID. Of course, there was only 5 rounds, but the Braves made the most out of it. They drafted a pitcher first in this draft. They did not have a second-round pick. They drafted an outfielder in the 3rd round. None of these guys ended up being really impact, but then 4th round they drafted Spencer Strider, and then 5th round we'll mention they drafted Bryce Elder as well. And even though Elder's struggling now, he obviously did a lot for the Braves last year. So only a 5-round draft. The Braves only had 4 picks, but man, just to get Strider out of that draft was really huge, um, to say the least. All right, 2021, the Braves go pitcher in 1st round, pitcher in the 2nd round, pitcher in the 3rd round, and then down in the 7th round, they get A.J. Smith-Shawver. Schwellenbach was, I believe, the 2nd-round pick in this draft. So Schwellenbach and A.J. Smith-Shawver. Not a whole lot else from this draft, at least not yet. So those 2 pitchers might tell the story on the 2021 draft and how good it was for the Braves. All right, in 2022, the Braves actually had quite a few picks in this draft at the top end. They had 2 first-round picks. They drafted a pitcher with each of those, 2 second-round picks, again, pitchers with those 2 picks, and then they drafted Drake Baldwin, catcher, with their 3rd pick. And this is also where they get Nacho Alvarez in the 5th round. So this one, of all of Alex Anthopoulos' drafts, this one actually, I think, could end up being the best draft for Anthopoulos. There's still a lot to be determined here. So a lot's up in the air, right? But you have Nacho Alvarez and Drake Baldwin knocking on the door of the big leagues right now. Owen Murphy was the top pick in this one, and he still could turn out to be a really good pitcher. Also, J.R. Ritchie, I mentioned him undergoing Tommy John surgery. He really hasn't fully begun his big league or his minor league career yet. He could be really good, so we just don't know. But I think there's still a lot of potential with the 2022 draft. All right, and then the 2023 draft, again, the Braves go pitcher in round 1, 2 pitchers in round 2, and then in their 3rd-round pick, they take a 3rd baseman, Sabine Ceballos, last year. So this was a very pitching-heavy draft. Couple of intriguing position players, like Isaiah Drake was taken in the 7th round. Interesting outfielder, very young, so we'll have to probably wait on him for a long time. But this, of course, is where Herschel Waldrop was taken with the 1st pick. I think Waldrop, of all of the picks that Anthopoulos has made, I think Waldrop may be the best pure talent the Braves have drafted during the Anthopoulos era. And we'll have to wait and see if all of that comes to fruition and he becomes a great big league pitcher, but certainly a talented pitcher with a lot of great stuff. So when looking at these drafts during the Anthopoulos era, a few things seem to be consistent to me. They prioritize college pitchers first, but they are not 100% dedicated to that. It's not like they're only going to take a college pitcher with their 1st pick, but it seems like they prefer that if there are talented guys on the board when they're picking. They prioritize pitching in the 1st round. You're only seeing in this whole time of Anthopoulos drafting, you only see 1 year in which the Braves took a position player. They actually took 2 position players in 2019 with 1st-round picks. But if you know much about the 2019 draft, it was just a very weak pitcher draft and a pretty strong position player draft. So if it was going to happen, it does make sense that it happened in 2019. And then, of course, they're going to lean into taking a pitcher probably before position player anyways, because as we know, guys, pitchers are more fragile, and you need a better depth of pitching. We've certainly seen that again this season. And so, and they have a greater value on the market as well, trade market or whatnot. So Yeah, it makes sense to draft pitchers, and I think now that the Braves are getting back into the international signing market, you can typically find more value with position players there. So their track record in the first round under Anthopoulos hasn't been great. I mean, I said some names, but not many first round, home runs from the Braves under Anthopoulos. But typically they're underslot. Typically they sign underslot guys in the first round, so they're not really reaching for the stars in their first round picks. But second, third, and especially third through fifth round is where they've really found some great values and great players. Again, they also tend to target position players after the second round. So while you can kind of expect pitchers to go with in the Braves' first two picks, they could surprise us and take a position player with their first or second picks this year. And that leads me to the strength of this draft class. So kind of like 2019, the strength of this draft class is not pitcher, it's actually position players and especially college position players. So, it doesn't necessarily mean the Braves are going to take position player this year and buck their trends, but it might mean that's a little bit more of a likelihood. So let's go into some likely names around where the Braves are going to pick 24th. I'm going to especially mention guys who have been, there's all these different mock drafts out there. So I'm going to pick some names of guys that I've seen in some mock drafts. I'm also going to throw out a couple other names that I think might make sense for the Braves, and then we'll wrap this episode up. All right, so some likely names around the 24th pick where the Braves draft this year. So some names have been mocked to the Braves. Just keeping in mind the Braves are like Fort Knox when it comes to rumors about who they'll draft, who they're interested in, who they're looking at. So everybody who's doing mock drafts around the Braves are totally guessing about who the Braves might take. All right, so the first prospect I'm going to talk about is Brody Brecht. And again, for any of these names, if I'm mispronouncing one, sorry, I'm brand new to these names, so I'm just going to apologize in advance. So Brody Brecht, pitcher, right-handed pitcher out of the University of Iowa. Big time stuff, upper 90s fastball, wipeout slider, maybe some of the biggest stuff, pure stuff in the entire draft. His issue is definitely command, which is why he would be slipping this far to the Braves. He might not get this far to the Braves, but it would be why he is there. That sounds very similar to Hurston Waldrop to me. So there could be some value here if he slips to the Braves. He's very athletic. And the Braves love athletic pitchers. Going all the way back to John Smoltz, this has been just kind of a thing that they organizationally kind of look for. He was so athletic that he played some wide receiver for Iowa in his sophomore year. So that's kind of interesting. He didn't get on the field a ton, but just the fact that he could do that tells you a lot about him. But, how bad are the command issues? Maybe they're so bad the Braves wouldn't want to go there. We'll just have to see. All right, the second guy who has been mocked to the Braves in some mock drafts, and again, sorry if I'm mispronouncing this name, Jurrangelo Cijntje. Again, sorry, that's a hard one. I would say right-handed pitcher or left-handed pitcher. This is the guy you might have seen on SportsCenter who is ambidextrous. So he can go right or left. He's out of Mississippi State. He's probably in the big leagues not going to pitch both hands. I mean, obviously it's a cool skill to have, and I guess if you really need him to, then okay, cool. But his from the right side, this is where many people would project him to rank higher. It's so funny to have different scouting reports of the same guy, just different hands. But he has a little bit more velocity from the right side, a little better stuff. Good slider, I would say plus slider, good changeup from the right side. Now he is undersized. Some people project him kind of like a Marcus Stroman. Heard that name tossed around. But mid 90s stuff. That's a little more than what Stroman's got. He's also, his family's from Curacao, so that's interesting to me, the Curacao connection. A lot of Braves have been from Curacao, so this guy would be definitely an interesting piece. And I guess, the other benefit, if you're ambidextrous, if you blow, if he's pitching from the right side and suddenly he needs Tommy John surgery, well, okay, you got him from the left side, right? It doesn't totally shut him down. I don't know. It's kind of interesting, as that is at least a potential. So, anyways, he is another guy that's been talked about for the Braves, but also another guy that might not be available, might get taken up before the Braves are drafting at 24. All right, next name, Braylon Daughtry, also a right-handed pitcher. California high school. He's a high schooler, so prep arm. Again, we would say the Braves tend to look towards the college arms first, but this guy has pretty awesome stuff. He's strong, athletic frame, consistent delivery, which helps him control all of his pitches. He has above average fastball, curveball, and slider. All of those grade out at 55. If you know the grade scales, 40 to 50 tends to be average. Anything above those are really good. If you're getting into 60s and 70s, it's elite. So maybe he doesn't have one elite pitch, but three really good pitches. Uh, Also, what interests me about Braylon Daughtry and why I think the Braves might look at him a little bit more, he's thought of to have really high makeup and baseball intelligence, just a really good kid. And he also might be an underslot candidate. He's more, if you look at the rankings, he's more ranked in like 35 or 40th overall. So if the Braves are drafting him 24th, maybe they could get him under slot, even though he's a high school pitcher. All right, next guy is William Schmidt, also a right-handed pitcher, Louisiana high school, prep arm, big time stuff, 6'4", right-handed pitcher, mid-90s fastball, and an elite curveball, 70 grade curveball. Um, I'm I'm wary about this guy a little bit. When you're talking about um, really hard throwing high school pitchers who also have really big curveballs, I just see a lot of arm issues. And obviously, you never know, but I just see arm issues possibly popping up. And there's also some signability questions for this kid. Um, he might go higher, and because he's a high school guy with and he's ranked a good bit higher than say Braylon Daughtry, if he slides us low, he might not sign, or he might sign in the second round for bigger slot and money. That's just how uh, the baseball draft is so different. So I really wonder, since the Braves tend to go under slot for most of their first round picks, if this guy would be even a possibility. All right. Next name, we'll get into a couple, or actually three position players now. Ryan Waldschmidt, he's an outfielder from Kentucky. His college career was unfortunately marred by injury. He tore his ACL, came back this past season. He hits the ball really hard, and he has a great eye at the plate. Big upside from this guy, and he just keeps improving since his ACL injury too. So really, the sky could be the limit for this guy. It's even possible he could play center field. He might be a little bit more of a left fielder, but if he can play center, his hit tool is 55, his power tool is 55. He's got speed, and like I said, that's improving as his knee improves. So this is another interesting name. All right, the next, and sorry, I lied to you a little bit. We got another pitcher, and then we'll go back to a position player. The next player is Cash Mayfield, which I think is a pretty sweet baseball name. Left-handed pitcher. So again, lefty now, left-handed pitcher. He is a high school prep arm out of Oklahoma. He's probably the best prep lefty in the draft, mid-90s fastball, one of the best changeups in the draft. His changeup grades to a 60, so a really good changeup with a 55 fastball. Um, all right, and then the last player I'll mention is Theo Gillen, shortstop out of high school in Texas. And so he might be the best prep bat in the draft. So if you could get that at number 24, I think that would be awesome. They project him to be a 20-plus homer guy with good average, 6'2", so a bigger guy. He has some defensive question marks. Not that he's a bad defender, but he had a labrum surgery, and that's in the shoulder, which can really zap your arm strength. So he might have to move from shortstop to second base, which does affect his value, which might allow him to drop to the Braves. You almost kind of think of a Vaughn Grissom, but I don't think that's a good comparison because Grissom's issue was more of just catching the ball consistently. I think Gillen is rated higher. He just would have a weaker arm, but a great hitting second baseman. I mean, I know we got Ozzie, but that's not how you draft, right? You just draft talent, and this guy could really be it. I mean, he's got a 60 grade hit tool, 55 power, and 60 speed. So this is a real athlete coming out of high school. It would definitely be outside of the Braves typical to draft a high school position player for sure, but you never know, right? Now, what would I like to see the Braves do? I always prefer position players. They're just a little more fun to dream on, and especially position players with great hit tools. I'm all about the hit tool. It's hard to teach hitting, but if a guy can hit, I think you can sometimes improve all the other stuff, right? But if you're a position player, you got to be able to hit. So among the players I've highlighted, I think that would mean the Braves should take either Theo Gillen or Ryan Waldschmidt. I would be really excited about either of those guys. But of course, the Braves' typical MO would be to take one of these pitchers, and especially probably one of these college pitchers. Of course, all these guys, I mean, you just don't know how the draft's going to go. All or most of these guys could be off the board by the time the Braves pick at 24, so that could shift around. Their thinking, or a guy could really slide that I'm not even thinking is going to be there for the Braves, and that would be kind of cool too. So, this draft, I mentioned this. I'll just kind of end with this. This draft is light on top pitching prospects. It may increase the chances that the Braves go position player early and focus on pitching after that. I think this is maybe the best chance the Braves take position player first, as has been the case since 2019. So, the MLB draft, I think, has become much more fun to watch. I'll definitely be watching it, and I hope you guys do too. Get into it a little bit and dream on. Of course, the Braves are a good team right now, but dream on the future of the Braves as well to watch the MLB draft. All right, guys. Well, thank you for tuning in to this special episode of State of the Braves, and I'll talk to you soon.